And it is the 5th of February, and it is the beginning of the state legislative session. And with me here tonight, we are very pleased to have Senator Tim Knopp, leader of the Republican minority in the state Senate, hailing from the Bend area and his district. Welcome to the show, Senator.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you, Kevin.
There's a lot of news that kind of swirls around both the legislative session, but also the recent developments that come from the last session when there was the walkout. So, I mean, kind of to bring people up to date, maybe what we could do is start with the court case and everything that developed out of the last session, so that folks can kind of understand the setting of what's going to happen here as we go forward.
Well, we know that the Supreme Court made a political decision based on the fact that they didn't follow the Constitution and the precedent that they have been putting together, ruling on for quite some time, and that is plain language. Plain language of the Constitution says that we had the opportunity to run again, and that we couldn't run in the election after our current term has expired.
So you're referring to Measure 113, just so folks know.
Talking about Measure 113, that's right, the most recent court decision. So the courts interpreted that as the election before, even though it says the election after. The court said, well, it's the election before because that was the voter intent. And so what we have is justices who aren't even following the Constitution and the language that was there. They're just trying to, quite frankly, just pander to the electorate who may or may not have had that in mind when they voted. You don't know what was in the minds of voters. So they're interpreting what they think was in the mind of voters. And in reality, what they should be doing and what they're tasked to do is to interpret the Constitution, which I believe they failed to do. So what that really means is that 10 Republican senators in Oregon can't run again in their next election. So for several of us, it's 2024. And then for several more, it is 2026. And we all have candidates who have stepped forward to run in those elections and replace us. And we appreciate that. We think there are some great conservative candidates out there, and we want to support them and do what we can. As for the rest of us, to different degrees, people will retire or will look at other opportunities for public service. I haven't ruled anything out, but I haven't ruled anything in either. It's it's less than a week old with this decision, and so what I want to do is help the Republican Senate caucus with the election cycle and really work hard, just like I did last cycle, to try to elect more Republicans. And we were able to pick up a seat, plus one in the Oregon Senate last time. And we want to at least hold where we are, if not pick up another seat in this in this cycle in 2024. So I'm going to be helping raise money and engage as much as my caucus members want me to. And, I'm ready to go. So, I've got a pretty good bill of health from my doctors, and, they are pretty excited, and I've got a pretty supportive employer who understands the need, the interest of making sure that we have more balance in the legislature in Oregon. And so we're going to do everything we can to create more balance than we currently have, and that will lead to better policy for Oregonians.
Well, and so that's the silver lining here, because it is disturbing that the highest court in Oregon, all of which have been appointed by Democrats for sure, Democrat governors, and I don't think any of them have been elected in open seat races. So seven mind readers decided that they could read the minds of voters, regardless of what voters was put in front of them in the plain language of what they were voting on. They claim they know. And I do think that that corrupts and damages the legal system and the Constitution, because that means that literally anything can be reinterpreted to mean whatever they want in the future. And that is concerning. But that also, the silver lining is uh, the fight goes on, and the belief by the people that put Measure 113 in place that what they were going to do is you'd be far more concerned about your political careers than doing the right thing. That didn't work out, did it?
Yeah. So, essentially what we ended up with was the justices are allowing Democrats to crush dissent. Currently in the legislature, the Democrats only want to hear your opinion if it's their opinion. And so, our opinion
That's free
was,
speech. Was that what free speech?
yeah, because our opinion is that they were being unlawful, unconstitutional, and uncompromising. That was our opinion. They didn't want to hear that. And so we stood up to them, and then they penalized us through the Senate president by giving us 10 unexcused absences, and thereby now, by court interpretation, disqualifying us from running again. In other words, they've effectively silenced us as it relates to us being in the state Senate. So that's what's happened. I think it's not healthy for our republic, and we have a republic, not a democracy. That's another thing that maybe the court should take a look at, because I'm all for voter participation, but we have a republic, not a democracy, not a straight democracy. Yep. And so that is why we have a constitution. And if the judicial branch doesn't do its job in interpreting the words on the page, we're going to run into a problem. And so I think this decision will be very damaging going forward, because I think it opens a can of worms that is going to be hard to deal with in the future on other cases based on this new ruling that they've set out.
Yeah, they've definitely set a precedent here. And even if they don't think so, when the Constitution is supposed to be the guiding document within which the voters have a degree of say in how the government's run. And then there's things that even voters can't get rid of without going through the process the Constitution lays out, right? Which is, supermajority amending things, but also you can't cancel freedom of speech, right? You can't there's certain things you're not supposed to be able to do, and it acts as a set of guardrails that's supposed to function within. So that's a concern, right, going forward as to how this is all going to, domino effect on future court cases and court decisions. But as you said, it was very political, right? And they decided to come down absurdly on the side of controlled opposition, that you're supposed to, behave a certain way, say certain things, and only be heard when you say what the people that are in charge want to hear. That is an issue. What's great about it is all the candidates you said that are stepping forward probably were inspired in no small way by the stance that you guys took, that you demonstrated that you had a backbone, that you wanted to fight and fight for what is right, and that you weren't going to be cowed or controlled. So now you've got more people stepping forward saying, I won't be controlled either, and I'm running.
Yeah, it's very true. And I think we've got a lot of great candidates that are running, and we're going to do what we can to support an excellent state Senate, because we need a healthy, Senate.
Well, and so now you flip the page here. Now you're in what is now the annual session. It's a short session. It just started. It lasts for what? A month, 5 weeks, something like that.
Yeah, it's only going to last 35 days at the most. And, I think there's going to be some significant things that happen in this session. I am hopeful that we will have a good housing bill that will help in terms of creating more housing production generally, and that housing is more affordable than what's currently been on the market. And then ballot measure 110 has been an unmitigated disaster, which was the ballot measure that passed that decriminalized hard drugs, including fentanyl. And so, if you have small amounts of these drugs, you can essentially do what you want because there is no real penalty for it. And so drug use is rampant, and so are overdoses. On an annualized basis, I think we're headed for 1,200 overdose deaths in a year. I mean, that's 1,200 Oregonians dying because of drug policy and the proliferation of drugs that has happened because of policies that are misguided, like Measure 110.
Well, and Measure 110, which passed in 2020, came at just the time when law enforcement found its resources being diminished already.
Yep.
And people like Mike Schmidt, a district attorney in Multnomah County, where Portland is, vowing not to arrest people for minor offenses, which the consequence of that is that not only have people been doing these hard drugs, but then they probably aren't really, in most cases, seeing any consequences for the crimes that they commit in furtherance of that drug habit. And then they're being subsidized, literally being handed everything they need to continue that lifestyle wherever they want, regardless of the consequences for their communities. In most cities in the state, particularly in Portland, where it's acute. And then we had the situation where law enforcement also doesn't have the resources to respond, even when there's all these serious crimes being committed. So it has just brought our entire state down, and our biggest city in particular.
Yeah, it really has. And it's a shame because Oregonians don't feel safe anymore. They don't feel safe going into downtown areas like Portland and other cities. There have been attacks. There have been obviously theft. There's been significant vandalism of businesses, and employees don't want to come to downtown Portland anymore. And so you're having this policy that is affecting the commercial real estate market in major cities like Portland. But Oregon has done the most progressive law as it relates to the decriminalization of drugs. And so our problem is much, much worse, and it's going to get significantly worse if we don't act. And this is an emergency. That is what this session was made for. It's made for short sessions were made for emergencies, technical fixes, and budgets. That's it. And at least that's what we were told. So little voter intent there for my Democrat friends, because apparently they really believe in that and want to make sure that the voters' intent was followed. So we're trying to help. And so we're trying to hold people to what was sold to Oregon voters. And it's the same thing with ballot measure 110. Oregon voters were sold that they were going to have this ballot measure that would help people get drug treatment. In reality, they were sold a bill of goods, and what it's turned into is just freewheeling drug use and drug sales everywhere. Like right in front of the police, in parks, near kids, doesn't matter. It's happening, and it's happening almost everywhere. And Oregonians are fed up, and they want us to resolve this issue. And that's why I think it's going to be one of the most significant issues in the short session. And I have our first committee. I'm on the committee that's going to deal with this issue. And so we have our first hearing this evening. It's the only evening committee going on in the short session. So, I am looking forward to trying to have input to change this policy that needs to be changed. And we need to recriminalize back to an A misdemeanor of drug possession, and we need to enhance penalties for drug dealers, because you can't tell me that a drug dealer isn't essentially a paid hitman,
Yeah.
a paid killer, because that's what's happening. And fentanyl is literally killing Oregonians 3 to 4 every day, day in and day out. It's like, when are our policymakers going to act to save lives of Oregonians? And this is a great example of where we can and where we can have an impact. We can empower law enforcement to do what they need to do to clean up our streets. So we should do it, and we should make Oregonians safe.
It's a real emergency, right? Not a political emergency.
That is correct.
And that's why this has to be real reform and not, window dressing type of reform, which is what you were getting at. I was just listening to an OPB report on my way to getting here to do the interview with you. And they were talking to a police officer in Portland while he was handing one of these citations that Measure 110 talks about to a fentanyl user. And it turns out that this fentanyl user, you listen to the police officer, he could ask him, like, I want to encourage you to try and get some treatment. The guy's like despondent. And it turns out that the only thing he did get from the guy was that the guy had received at least one of these citations before, and it had absolutely no consequence for the guy. And he still didn't care while he was literally being interviewed live on OPB. And so this is something that has to be fixed. Could you describe a little bit about the difference between the proposals that we've been hearing about, which is apparently not necessarily the most sincere reform, which I believe is a Class C misdemeanor, versus the actual what is it? You said a Class A misdemeanor, right? There's a big difference between those two, isn't there?
There is. So prior to this ballot measure passing and being implemented, drug possession in Oregon was a Class A misdemeanor, and that is a year in prison if you essentially don't get drug treatment. So there was a penalty that most drug addicts didn't want to endure, and so they would seek drug treatment. After the ballot measure, the penalty for drug possession of, again, hard drugs, fentanyl, heroin, methamphetamine, and so on, the penalty, cocaine, the penalty was literally a ticket, like a speeding ticket, basically.
Yeah.
And the police stopped writing them because there was no real reason to, because there was literally no penalty for the people who were going to receive them anyway. And the ticket was, I don't know,
$100, I think.
Yeah, $100 or whatever it was, or is. And it encourages you to call a phone number for help. Well, to no one's shock, almost no one called. I mean, less than 1% of people were getting tickets. And again, the police stopped really writing these tickets, I mean, to a very low level. So the proposal from the Democrats, and they're saying, oh, well, we're going to recriminalize. They're going to go from a ticket to just barely criminal, which is the lowest misdemeanor you can have, Class C misdemeanor, 30 days in jail. No one is serving 30 days in jail on a C misdemeanor. It is almost no different than what currently exists today. We need to go back to what it was and treat this more like driving under the influence. You get arrested, you get taken to the station, you can post a bond and be released, but there's a real penalty facing you unless this is your first time and you want to go into a diversion program and you want to show that you're going to be alcohol free and you're going to be responsible.
So that's if it's a Class A, then you could go into a diversion program, which would divert having to serve up to a year, at which the Class C history has shown that almost nobody serves that. Plus, isn't there some provision where you don't even face a real possibility of being sentenced, and
Well, that's
you have
right.
the option of getting some kind of treatment, maybe.
Yeah. So there's this term that was, I don't know, made up or borrowed called deflection. Apparently, diversion was too difficult and was too tough on people.
Too
So
clear.
diversion was too clear. So it's now deflection. I shudder to think what it could be in years to come when deflection is too tough on somebody's psyche.
Yeah.
But here's my position. I cannot, as a lawmaker in this state, subject the community to a drug addict's decision on where and whether they want to seek treatment. That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard, that we're going to just rely on because we're told that treatment is more successful when the addict decides to choose it. Well, you have to look at the damage that's going to be done by that decision. And the damage that's done is not only to the individual drug user, where they're getting brain damage essentially from fentanyl overdoses.
Yep.
Every time they OD and survive, which again, 1,200 of them a year are not surviving.
Right.
But when they survive, they are essentially getting like a brain trauma with each overdose. And so you're not only getting that negative consequence, but then you're getting the consequence to the community. So whether that's the family of this individual or the businesses that get vandalized or stolen from, or individuals who get robbed, carjacked, assaulted, what have you, from these people who are high on drugs. And I think pretty much every Oregonian at this point has seen someone that is completely high on drugs and acting visibly high. And so every time you come in contact with one of these people, you don't know what that outcome is going to be. And so that is why Oregonians feel unsafe. I used to feel very safe going to downtown Portland, walking almost anywhere in that city, which it was a beautiful city. And it's where I was born in 1965. And, I love Portland and the beauty that it had. And, the City of Roses, incredible. I would walk up in Washington Park. I'd walk all through downtown, down by the riverfront. I didn't think anything of it. I really didn't. Now I don't even want to walk during the day.
Yeah.
The noon hour to go to lunch somewhere in downtown Portland, because there's all these addicts that literally basically own the streets because of the policies that Democrats have put in place and failed to change when they know they're not working. Now, the progressive left and the Drug Policy Alliance, George Soros funded groups.
Yeah, to New York.
This is where this is coming from. And they want drug use legalized everywhere. And so they started with Oregon, a very cheap state to buy, which they did buy it. And, they, went through a campaign and convinced Oregonians that this would be a good idea. But Oregonians bought into drug treatment. They didn't buy into just letting people
Anything
use
goes.
drugs.
Yeah.
Just let drug users do anything they want. And that's what is happening. And anecdotally, we're hearing from law enforcement that there are many of these people that have come from other states to basically use drugs unfettered in Oregon and try to reap whatever benefit they can reap from government while they're here and using their drugs. And it is a huge drain on our system, both in terms of law enforcement, in terms of mental health, in terms of crime. It's a difficult situation.
Well, it's blighted the state and its biggest cities, and it's also overwhelmed the limited resources we had to deal with all the other problems that have affected people's livability, crime, and it's interesting because when it comes to alcohol use, that's significantly regulated. You just can't go wander around in the streets and do whatever you want when it comes to alcohol use. Uh, you can be arrested for drinking alcohol on a sidewalk in front of a business, but if you do fentanyl, they can't touch you right now. And Portland, for instance, I believe, wants to make public use of fentanyl in particular illegal again, but they can't do it unless this significant change happens to state law, right? State law is in the way of people in Portland who actually want to do something about what's happening in Portland.
Yeah, this particular proposal that's being considered, House Bill 4002, does not go far enough to protect Oregonians. So we need to be clear about that.
Well, and I find the word deflection interesting because when you I think they made a mistake picking that word, because if you go talk to you talk to a child who does something wrong and they deflect, that's usually pointing blame to someone else and trying to avoid accountability for themselves. We don't let kids do that. That's actually a total common sense, like that doesn't work. But they think that they can actually advance this as a fundamental policy of how we handle the state's biggest single problem that we're facing. And everybody knows it, right? It's driving all of these other problems and issues that have made the state, less livable, particularly at cities, but it's also made it very expensive. We're spending enormous sums of money on this already, aren't we? And it's not working unless we get a change in the law.
There's no question that it's not going to work. In fact, it may get worse, and most likely will. And I think that's a terrifying prospect for Oregonians, especially people who live in Portland, to think about how this could get worse. And one of the problems I have with what has happened is kids in the state are looking at this and saying, well, I mean, it's not illegal. And to kids, many times illegal means okay. And it's not okay.
Yeah.
Drug use isn't a choice. It's a death sentence, because you either become an addict and it destroys your life. And whether that's drugs or alcohol, if you abuse them, it will literally destroy your life. And the state is either going to have to pick up the tab for that, or your family's going to have to pick up the tab, or you're going to steal from people to basically support your lifestyle. So we have to do more than what is currently being proposed. And we need to get serious about it. I want to lower the amount of fentanyl pills you can have before it becomes a Class A misdemeanor. Right now you can have 5, I believe. And I want to lower that to 2. Fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more powerful as a drug than heroin is. And I believe that's the stat. And I mean, that should say something.
And there was actually a recent liquid heroin bust that occurred. I'm sure you've stayed abreast of that. Representative Jeff Helfrich, your counterpart in the House, had some choice words about this, and that is the less dangerous drug we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, what has happened was an open invitation for the drug cartels to set up shop in Oregon.
Yeah.
And they have, and they are. And Oregonians are not going to like the result of that happening. So they need to encourage their lawmakers through contact, email, personal visit to the legislature or a district office. I recommend that you do something that you can have documented. So an email can be documented. Phone calls really aren't documented.
Yeah.
I don't recommend people calling legislators. Send an email, send a letter, in some way, go on the OLIS system, the Oregon Legislative Information System, and submit your testimony for House Bill 4002 when there's a public hearing on it. So there's plenty of opportunity to be able to do that. And I would encourage Oregonians to tell their legislators to do more, because not if we just window dress this thing, and I will not vote for a bill that is just window dressing. If it's a Class C misdemeanor, it just doesn't get the job done. They're going to have to do better than that. And they should do better than that for Oregonians to make them safer.
Yeah, so it's House Bill 4002, and they can go to OregonLegislature.gov, right? And they can find all the information there about the bills, the committees, and their legislators that they can contact. And I think what you said is very true. Go in person, that's good. Try to offer testimony. There will be very limited hearings, right? Because it's such a short session, but sending an email might be by far the best way, because it's unequivocal. You said what you said, it goes on the public record, and they can't say, well, you didn't, when you called, we thought that you were really just trying to tell us to be a little bit tougher. No, this is actually get this done, specifically make it a Class A misdemeanor. Is there now, one of the problems that people have with what's occurred under Measure 110 is the crime wave that's been generated. Are there some aspects to this or other bills that are going to address the crime wave that's hit the state, that has people very frustrated, and in some cases, as you've said, just not feeling safe in their own towns and neighborhoods?
I haven't seen in the bill stack, there's about 300 bills, I think, in the process for the short session. I haven't seen anything that directly impacts the safety of Oregonians more than House Bill 4002. And that's why it's important to get this policy right and not just pass something for political purposes to try to get off the political hot seat before the November election. We need to actually pass a policy. And if you're around me long enough, you're going to hear me say this phrase: good policy, not good politics. So sometimes good policy and good politics align. For Democrats, they have a base that is supportive of drug use, and drug use is a choice. And it's just dead wrong. And so the Democrats have to defy that base and do the right thing. As John F. Kennedy said, I'm paraphrasing, let's not do the Republican thing, let's not do the Democrat thing, let's do the right thing.
Yeah.
And the right thing here is to recriminalize, like every other state and most of the rest of the world, because they know that creating a penalty for significant drug use of hard drugs we're talking about is necessary in order to gain compliance and get people directed toward treatment and a life trajectory that is going to be positive for themselves and the community. And so I hope that is what happens in this session, and I'm going to work toward that. But you can even testify now. I think you can testify virtually.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So you don't even have to come to Salem. Hey, we'd encourage you to come and sit in a hearing room and see your government and participate in it. But if you can't do that, I obviously understand that and would encourage you to testify virtually on House Bill 4002. It's an evening committee, so most people, not everybody, most people are off work by between 5 and 7 p.m., let's say, which is when this committee is going to operate. And so we're meeting at least a couple days a week, and we'll see if we end up meeting more.
So this is and by the way, there's a headline article I saw. It says fentanyl killing the mentally ill for $1 a pill in Oregon. That's what we're doing. That's what we're putting a stop to, and stopping all of the issues that are mushrooming from this. Now, there's some other things that you've got at stake in the legislature in a very short session, right? So bills actually have to get someplace, like out of a committee, by like, what is it, like 10 days or something like that?
Oh yeah, you have to have a hearing pretty much this week or early next week at the latest, and you have to have a work session, which is a session to take action on the bill and move it to one of the floors, either the House or Senate floor, or to Ways and Means.
And then it has to then get voted on, pass, and then it goes to the other chamber and it gets
Right.
worked on there, and then it could get to the governor. So there's not a lot of time to do this. But there's also the issue of housing, right? Which
Absolutely.
a lot of people have conflated the housing issue
Yeah.
with what's been driving a lot of homelessness as we see it, with people living in tents and doing meth and fentanyl. A lot of the people that are doing meth in tents, their chief problem isn't necessarily that they that's just a little too expensive for them to go live in a home. But there is a segment of our society that's actually facing this problem, right? Especially when it comes to workforce, and in many towns in the state that would like to expand and service the needs they have in the state. They can't actually build affordable housing.
Right.
Isn't it true that it's not just a matter of money, even though I think there's going to be some money expended on this, and there already is money. But isn't the government the chief reason why you can't build housing? It's sort of like we've got these archaic anti-house building laws on the books that actually make it harder, the land use laws, to do this. Is this going to move? Are they going to make some changes with this? And are you hopeful?
Well, I'm hopeful. Again, the left wants status quo. Even though this bill protects prime farmland, the housing bill is what I'm referring to. It's the governor's bill. It's the only bill she put in. And she's trying to do something about housing production. And one of the most important pieces of this is to make sure that we have more land available in a short period of time to catch up. We're 100,000 housing units behind where we need to be. We're short. That means 100,000 Oregonians don't have housing that is needed. And so in order to make that happen and increase production, you have to start with two things. You have to have a workforce, but you also have to have land available in order to build this housing. Oregonians don't want to be stacked on top of each other like San Francisco or New York or some foreign city in China or Japan. They want a little bit of room, and study after study has showed that. And we should give them a little bit of room. Like, can't we give people what they want? I think we should, because that's what we're here to do, is to respond to the people. So
are you speaking of single family homes in particular? Because as I understand,
single family,
yeah, that's one of the things they're going to allow. Yeah.
Townhouse. People want to own a little piece of something, and especially like Central Oregon, where I'm from. I mean, we have people move from Portland and major metropolitan areas in California because they don't want to be stacked like cordwood next to their neighbor. They want a little bit of room, and so, but the state law is forcing Central Oregon and other cities to do exactly what happens in these major metropolitan areas, which is stack people together like cordwood. And they're not interested in that. And so you need to give people the product that they want. In other words, let the free market work.
Yeah.
People will choose what housing they want, or they'll go to where they can get the housing that they want. It looked like we had a negative net decrease of Oregon's population and Oregonians being here in this state in the last year over year. You might ask yourself why that is. And people are leaving Oregon. They don't, because they feel unsafe, because housing prices are too high. They can't afford the cost of living anymore. So as these Democrat policies that are raising the cost of almost everything, both at the federal and state level, I call it Biden inflation, because he ramped it up in a really big way. There is no free money, yet they acted like they could print money anytime they wanted and as much as they wanted. And what that does is it energizes inflation. And that, what did that cause? Cause an increase in interest rates.
Yep.
As a response to it, and to slow inflation down. And by slowing inflation, what the whole idea behind that is basically kill the economy and kill jobs. And all you have to do is look at what economists have said from these banks. And they've said that they need to basically unemploy people in order to slow this economy down. Well, works great if you're not one of the people that gets unemployed.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of people will be unemployed because of these policies. And so we need to choose policies that are healthy, both economically for our citizens. And we need to make sure that, we're doing everything we can to create the opportunity there for people to succeed. And I don't think unemploying people and making them lose their jobs is the
It's a great economic policy. Yeah. And
it doesn't seem like an effective economic policy to me to destroy someone's life by, getting them fired and making sure that they are unemployed.
Or causing interest rates to be so high they can't afford to buy things that require loans. Yeah. I mean, that's effectively where we're at. Well, I know you,
school loans, houses,
all that stuff.
what have
Yeah.
you. Yep.
Now I know you're kind of time limited here and have to get back to the session and to everything that's going on. Any last stinkers that we should just have a heads up on? And I don't remember the bill, the COTEC bill that you mentioned. If you know the number of that, but
I don't know the bill number. I'd probably get it wrong. No, I would just say, watch Kevin's show, Capital Audience and Captive Audience, and make sure. I used to call it Capital Punishment, but that was only me being on it and viewers having to listen to it. So it's like Capital Punishment. But anyway, thank you for the opportunity to be on. We'll try to keep you informed as the session goes along.
Thank you so much, Senator. And we will stay engaged and make sure that folks make their voices heard here in the coming weeks. And if there's something that we need to alert people to, we'll get everyone on it ASAP. And thank you again for your vigilance, the courage you guys have showed at standing up for what's right and continuing to fight. And I know you're going to continue to fight there in Salem, and you're going to need our support, and we'll continue doing that.
Thank you much. Appreciate it.
Have a great rest of the day. And thanks, everyone, for watching. We'll be back with the next episode of the Captive Audience tomorrow night. It should be David and I with plenty of news, I'm sure, from the session and everything